Welcome to Spark, a leadership series hosted by the Office of Student Life's Buckeye Leadership Fellows Program, where we connect with university and community leaders as well as university alumni to hear more about their stories, principles, and knowledge for the next generation of Buckeyes. Join us as we explore leadership lessons and advice for the future. All right, well, welcome back again for another Spark conversation with another great Ohio State alum. Today, we are going to be having a conversation with someone who's very familiar with what it's like to navigate the university campus and be extraordinarily involved and be a really great representative for what the student experience looks and feels like at Ohio State. So we want to welcome our very first guest, well, not our first guest, but first guest today for our conversations, Celia Wright, who is class of 2015. Celia, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. Good. How about you?
Doing great. And you're joining us from good old New York City.
New York. Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. We're going to get started in talking a little bit about where you are right now, what you're doing professionally, and if there's any really cool things happening in your life that you want to share.
Sure. So I work in philanthropy at this human rights oriented global philanthropic organization doing monitoring and evaluation. So I'm on this strategy unit, and we help people who make grants assess how those grants are going and if they're meeting the goals that they had at the start. It's an interesting job that allows me a lot of variety, and I have really enjoyed it. And I have a public health background. So I majored in public health at Ohio State, and I went to grad school here in New York for a master's in public health, and now using some of that toolbox in my monitoring and evaluation role. As far as like fun things, I just got a foster dog yesterday. I want to show her to you, but she's sleeping. So maybe if she wakes up, I'll display her.
Oh, that's awesome. What's your foster dog's name?
Her name is Jennifer.
I love dogs with human names. The best.
I know. It's hilarious. Yeah, I just had to laugh. Yeah.
That's awesome. We obviously knew what your role was in New York City, but I'm really curious to dig into that a little bit more when we talk about community engagement, because I think a lot of times we see those as two very separate things from what we're doing professionally and then how we serve our communities. And I want to really kind of explore that intersection for you on your professional path of continuing to give back professionally, but also having other experiences as well. So we're going to circle back to some of the work that you do as well. But one of our favorite questions, and the first questions that we have to ask every Buckeye that we talk to, is about where you're from. So if you could tell us about your hometown and maybe how that experience growing up and where you're from, where you kind of placed your roots in the beginning of your journey, what that's meant for you as you've expanded and graduated and explored the world since.
Sure. So I'm from Avon Lake, a suburb on the west side of Cleveland, and it was a great place to grow up. I felt really supportive. There was a nice community there where everybody knows everybody. It was a nice place for me to develop. But I'd also say it was a really homogenous place to grow up. And I think growing up somewhere like that, it's easy to be overconfident about what's wrong with the world, what can be done to make it better. And it was really at Ohio State where my exposure to different kinds of people and experiences provided me with a more nuanced worldview. And I got a lot of that in my public health degree. So I am so grateful to my hometown for providing this nurturing origin for me. But I'm also really grateful to Ohio State for expanding on that and making me more of the person I am today.
So it's really fun. I'm not from Ohio.
Oh, yeah.
So I have in the last few years, as I meet more students, starting to become a little bit more familiar with where the different cities and hometowns were. So my eyes lit up a little bit. I was like, oh yeah, I was like, I'm familiar now with Avon Lake. So great. Great transition to Ohio State. And it's, education for citizenship. So it's great to hear that coming to Ohio State really helped broaden that global perspective for you. Talk to us a little bit about what your Ohio State experience was like. Any really cool things you got an opportunity to do here, meaningful moments, significant people that have had a lasting effect on your life?
Of course. Yeah. So part of why I came to Ohio State is I had no idea what I wanted to do with my career. I had a really broad outlook, and I knew that Ohio State had pretty much every major I could think of. And they also have a good program for people who are still deciding what they want to major in. And that drew me to the school. So I actually didn't even declare a major until the end of my sophomore year when we were required to make a decision. And that's when I decided to major in public health. And I also minored in Spanish and international studies. I was very stressed about the decision to make that major. And one thing I was thinking about, a lot of students agonize over the major decision. It's something everyone asks you all the time. And the major is really more about the journey than the destination. Like, nobody cares what your piece of paper says. You can leverage pretty much any major to create any career that you want. It's important to think about your toolbox. Are there technical skills that you should build while you're in school to appeal to a certain kind of employer or to prepare you for a certain kind of grad program? But beyond that, by the time you declare your major, if you wait until the last minute like me, you've already, if you're kind of following your heart in what classes you choose today, you've figured out your major. I wish someone had told me that. I think it would have taken the heat off. So that's a glimpse into the academic side of things. I also was really involved in a bunch of different student orgs. The most prominent for me would be student government. And I got involved my freshman year because I wanted to make a big school feel smaller. It made my day when I saw one person I knew walking across campus. And I really loved when I went to student government meetings, the size of the group and the collegial spirit among them. So I kept going back, and eventually I got hooked, not just on friendship, but what I saw as a compelling vehicle to make real change in the lives of students and the community of Columbus. It was the first opportunity I really had like that in my life, where you put so much energy into something and something real can come of it. So I was really passionate about student government and used the platform of eventually being the president of student government to advocate for improvements ranging from our meal plan to trying to create a bike share to campus recycling to campus sexual violence policy and our fee system. So I learned a lot and loved it, and it gave me a lot of really great skills. I also was involved in the Collegiate Council on World Affairs, which is like Model UN, and I made some really wonderful friends there. And I would say that experience also taught me about the importance of networking and the inherent value of socializing for your career. I learned that success in Model UN isn't who gives the best speech, it's who takes the time when people aren't speaking to make other people feel appreciated and noticed. So I learned a lot there as well. So those are a few things that that kind of defined my college experience.
I love that. I love the idea of thinking about relationships and how you're building and leveraging the relationships for a variety of different reasons. It could be because you're, trying to strengthen that skill set going into whatever professional path you're heading on, or, how from that friendship, you're really just building relationships and taking people along with you on that life journey. So I love that. So you alluded to in this process of discovering what you wanted to study here at Ohio State, that it took a bit of time. So you had this 2-year exploratory phase, and I'm sure you ran into a couple of roadblocks along the way. Are there any specific roadblocks, challenges that you faced? And it could be during your time here at Ohio State, but even so far in your career since you've been gone from Ohio State, anything specific that comes to mind, and some significant lessons that you learned from that?
Yes, so many roadblocks to to consider. So one that comes to mind is I had a major and 2 minors. I was really involved, every day after class, I had some extracurricular activity, sometimes multiple, and every weekend I would. I got way less sleep. And I think, you might have seen this Venn diagram. It's kind of a joke, but it's like you can choose between having good academics, a good social life, and, extracurricular involvement, like pick two. And I had a great social life. I lived with 8 of my best friends, and I was in a sorority, and I enjoyed that. But I will say that was the slice of the pie that I sacrificed most willingly to make room for the others. And I remember my senior year, my housemates had this tradition of going to this bar for ladies' 80s every week. And I had never been. And it was the last week of school, and I went with them. And it was so much fun. And I remember all the times they asked me if I wanted to go, and I felt like I shouldn't because I had too much to do. And it's important to prioritize academics and, your extracurriculars. But I thought, wow, I won't get that opportunity back. And I wish I had recognized the inherent value of having a lively social life at the time. So that's one. Another one I would say as a recent graduate, that I think a lot of students go through, especially if they were very involved, is they're terrified of applying for jobs. When you're a busy student, you're constantly treading water and looking for the next assignment, the next thing you have to do for your student org. And it's hard to plan longitudinally. And a lot of students who are graduating from college and don't yet have full-time work experience, I think, struggle to advocate for themselves and really take the time necessary to give the job search its due. For me, one consequence of that fear was going to grad school almost immediately after college. I think a lot of people make that decision because school is familiar and safe, and you know how to do school, and school seems like a good idea, and no one's disappointed in you if you're in school. It's kind of a scarier leap to apply to jobs. And I had this impression when I graduated that with my bachelor's in public health, I wouldn't be able to find a job that was gratifying enough to me to justify working and then going to school. But I think I made that assumption too quickly. I'm not saying I know I did the wrong thing. I don't regret anything. It all worked out great for me. But I noticed when I was in grad school and I met people who had worked first, they brought more enriching experience to the classroom. They were more competitive for jobs that we were applying for upon graduation because they had experience, and they had saved up more money before we all went to school. So there were so many advantages to that approach. And when I notice people going to school right after undergrad, especially if they're not sure what they want to use the degree for, I encourage them to try a little harder to find a job they would like. And when I graduated grad school, that fear of applying for jobs didn't go away. And instead, I had 2 degrees and no full-time work experience. So I went through the same thing. In that situation, I ended up accepting the first job I got an offer for, I think because I was so desperate to get the search over with. But that job wasn't great for me. And if I had tried a little harder, I think I could have found something better. So I advise people to be patient and really use that uncomfortable job application time to learn about themselves and show themselves how much their hard work and commitment to them can pay off. So that's another kind of roadblock. The final thing I'd say is that another challenge I think recent graduates face is not having enough experiencing balancing work and personal life. In college, it's all mixed together. Is extracurricular personal or work? And you're used to doing everything for free. I mean, things that we did for free in student orgs, and we didn't resent it. And as a graduate, you're getting wisdom from family and well-meaning mentors who say, work hard, put in your time, you'll climb that ladder, you'll be rewarded. And I think a lot of people don't have the protective instinct that they should in their first job to know my time matters. I am being paid to deliver labor. I'm not part of a family. This is a job, and I deserve to have a life that isn't my job. I've just seen a lot of people struggle with that in their first jobs out of undergrad or grad school. I went through it in my first job out of grad school, and I just urge people to recognize that when they've graduated, like you're living the adult life you always wanted to have. And if there are things that are missing from that life, like having a personal life, or maybe getting a pet, or making yourself a good dinner when you come home, it's within your power now to change that. And sometimes it's going to require you to create boundaries for work. So those are a few roadblocks that come to mind.
Really great advice there. I think talking about looking at your experience more holistically, but also leveraging the experiences that you have. So thinking about students who are very involved on campus and maybe, haven't secured internships or professional experiences that would help. How do you then look at the experiences that you've had in leadership roles on campus, and how do you leverage those? And I think that's really important. I think those are a lot of things that we don't spend a lot of time talking about. And I appreciate you hitting on that fear that a lot of people feel in trying to make the next steps, or that pressure too. I think there's a lot of pressure. And I know we're getting to that with the fall semester and the career hunt and career fairs. And I know a lot of students feel a lot of pressure to secure something in order to present that they're moving along the path in the right ways. And it's really hard to determine what that's going to look like for any individual person, and taking the time to really think about all the experiences that you've had, and strategically plan. And like you said, be patient. Everything doesn't happen in 24 hours. Sometimes it takes, a couple of weeks, sometimes it takes a couple of months, but eventually in the end, it definitely works out. We see this all the time with students. And it's always really exciting once they kind of come around to that realization, like, I was going to be okay. Like, I know what I'm doing, had a great experience. So really great advice. And I would urge every student, if you have to rewind it and listen to it a couple of times over the next few months, definitely do that. You mentioned well-meaning mentors. So let's talk a little bit about your heroes. Let's talk about the people who have been great mentors and coaches for you over the course of your career, your academic experience. And are there any great nuggets that they've left you with that just kind of really resonate with you now?
Yes. There are so many people I am so grateful for. As I mentioned, I majored in public health, and I can think of several faculty who I really appreciated from that program. One of the highest profile now is Amy Acton, who was teaching an introductory public health course at the time that I was a student. She took a really unique amount of time to get to know every student in class, and she required every student to come to her office hours twice and just to talk about themselves. And that was wonderful. And it showed me by force the importance of networking with your professors. I think as a student at a public school, some students don't feel entitled to do that. I remember I went to this banquet one time, and there was this professor being honored who came to Ohio State from Harvard. And he said he was so disappointed at the end of his lectures that everybody would just leave the classroom. And at Harvard, they were lined up to talk to him. And I felt kind of angry hearing that, because I recognized as a student that I didn't think we were supposed to bug the professors with questions, or that we were supposed to go to their office hours if it wasn't to talk about something really specific, like, I don't understand the requirements for this assignment. Once I was in grad school, I really took advantage of professors' time. And I often noticed in a big lecture hall at Columbia, where I got an MPH, the students lining up to talk to the professors were more likely to have gone to a higher resourced private school than a public school. And it was us public school students who had to fight this, oh, I don't want to be a nag, to make that contact. So somebody like Amy Acton, I think, really encouraged that among students. And I would advise students to when they really appreciate a professor in any way, try to take the time to tell them that and get a chance to know them if you can. Another great mentor in the College of Public Health was Amy Furkatich. She was my honors advisor, and I was struggling to complete a thesis assignment that was required for my honors degree. And I just felt like a failure all the time. But she was so kind and made me feel like I belonged. And she helped me see that I could use some of the work I was doing in student government on sexual violence to fulfill my thesis requirement, because I had launched this task force to do a survey and issue recommendations on how we improve our campus climate. And that was sort of a dissertation. So I really appreciate her for that. So those are a couple from Ohio State that came to mind. I also really appreciated the people I met and worked with in student government. So our advisor, Matt Couch, in student life was an incredible, thoughtful resource who I met with every week, and we would just talk about whatever came up regarding student government. And he had such a wonderful perspective and really helpful institutional memory on the organization that is so often lost in student orgs because the turnover rate is so high with everybody graduating within 4 years. So I really appreciated him. Those are just a few that I can think of. And one other piece of advice I thought of from Amy Acton again was when I was applying to grad school. I was talking to her about it. I was getting ready to study for the GRE, and I was really nervous. And she told me not to worry about it, like to try to study. But she said the GRE isn't the gatekeeper for grad school. It won't keep you from your top program. It can just be something extra. If you do well on the GRE, you might get more funding and you might have more options. And I really internalized that mentality, and it was immensely helpful for me because when I thought about the GRE, the way that I think the SAT or ACT can be, where it can be a gatekeeper, and it's just like a number system to rule people out, at least for the field of public health and for master's degrees. It could be totally different for PhDs, you could tell us, or other programs. The GRE was one of many criteria considered, and I was amazed when I was in my program. If I talked to people about the GRE, there was a huge variety in how people did. So it's not worth being afraid of. That was some helpful advice I got from her.
That's really great advice. I know you just said I could tell you, yes, like all things education, you'll get me on a soapbox, but I think it's really important. We talked about holistic experiences earlier as well, but when you're looking for advanced education and you're looking for that next step, I would strongly recommend that students look at programs that are looking at the full scope of your experience, because you're going to get, in my personal opinion, better support, better coaching. You'll have a much better academic experience when you're thinking about it across the board and not just in terms of a GPA or GRE scores. So really great advice. I also want to take a second to shout out Dr. Couch. He is a phenomenal staff member here who does a really great job supporting our students in student government. And I also wanted to take a second here because I've had this conversation multiple times over the last few months about connecting with faculty members. I've actually had it several times in the last week or so. And I think that was really important as well. It's like really helping students get over this hump and this fear of what it means to even just have a conversation. And it's disheartening, I think, not only for staff members, but for faculty to hear that students feel as though like I'm bothering you, I can't ask you questions, I can't approach you. And I think one of the things that we all have to remember is that faculty members are people too. And they're very passionate about their work and they're really excited. And I always tell people, no one goes into education if they're not passionate about what it is that they're educating students on. And so they create this really great transformational experience inside the classroom and potentially, if you really want it, outside of the classroom. So I think that is great advice to definitely encourage students to make that contact, even if it's just an email, to ask them about their background, their experience, the research they're working on. If they're writing anything, to share what you're learning in their classes, it can be very beneficial. So I appreciate you, focusing on our faculty relationships with our students as well.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to hear about how you've been engaged in your community and how you've been paying it forward. I know that you're still very connected to the Ohio State campus and how you engage, but tell us a little bit about some of the experiences and the things that you've done since you graduated from Ohio State to give back to the community, whether it's been here on campus or in New York City or elsewhere.
Sure. So there are a few things. At Ohio State, I have been involved since graduation with the Ohio State College of Public Health Alumni Society. And the society tries to create opportunities for interaction between faculty and students and any opportunities to enrich students' experience possible, like networking events or moments like this where an alum shares about their experience, things like that. And I've participated in some of those events, and having appreciated that exposure as a student, it's neat to be on this end where you can hopefully make somebody feel like they are a little more confident about how they're going to approach their degree and career the way people made me feel confident. So I've enjoyed that. Beyond that, so I live in New York now, and I have been involved with a group called the New Sanctuary Coalition, which is a pro se legal representation clinic for people who are undocumented. And we give advice on how they approach their immigration cases. I speak Spanish. I minored in Spanish, and I feel so embarrassed all the time because I am not the interpreter. I wish I was, but it's all volunteer based and they just need help. So I've been able to be even better at Spanish than I thought I was by facilitating some important conversations between people who are attending the clinic and lawyers. I also, as I mentioned earlier, am a dog foster parent from time to time, and I have my pooch here right now. So those are a few things I've done to feel involved in the community, and I highly recommend each of them. I remember when I first went to this dog shelter, I went to like help clean, and I was mopping the floor, and everybody was so nice to me. And I was in a really stressful job at the time, and mopping the floor at the shelter and seeing all the dogs and the staff who were like, "Thanks for being here, like great job mopping." It just made me feel like I didn't even think I was doing a great job mopping, but they wanted me to feel good. And it was so nice to have something in my life that wasn't being evaluated. And I think volunteer work can allow you to bring your heart to something without worrying about how someone else sees your contribution. So I think it's like chicken soup for the soul. And it can also be a really great way to meet people when you move somewhere new. So I'm all for community engagement as much as one can.
Also really great advice. A lot of graduating seniors are thinking about what is my life going to look like in the next spot and how do I engage? And so we're always trying to encourage them to stay connected with the University Alumni Associations. Think about how you can get involved in your community so you can start building your own individual communities as well. So I think that that's great. And honestly, like, who doesn't love a pup? You know, I'm sure a lot of the students are really excited to be back on campus. And when finals week rolls around, or even before, I'm sure we'll see all of our four-legged friends here on campus to help with that stress level. So we're excited about it. I don't know if you've seen in like the last few years at commencement, there's a lot of pups at commencement now, and they have their own little graduation caps. It's the best thing ever. It makes everybody happy.
Oh my God, that's impressive.
Yeah, super cute. All right, well, Celia, what's next for you as you think about how life continues to move and chug along? You know, what's next for you in your adventures?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I'm working at this global philanthropic organization, and I love it so much. I love working at the organization I work because I believe in their mission and the work that they do. And it's fun to be a cog in the machine that helps make that happen. That gives me a lot of energy every day when I come to work. And even if I'm feeling tired, you know, I had a couple long meetings or something's frustrating me, I can just remember why I want to contribute to that work. And it really does motivate me. So I really enjoy and appreciate that. The other thing I like about working for like a big organization, this isn't true for every person that works for a large company or organization, but at least for me, from where I sit, I get exposed to all kinds of things all the time. And I am learning so much every day. I started in this role in 2019, but the amount that I learn every day in my job, you wouldn't know. It's been, you know, more than a year because I'm constantly growing. And that's so important for me to have a job that facilitates that. I also have a type of job because it's analytical, because there's a lot of variety that requires me to kind of educate myself on an ongoing basis about the places where we work and the issues that we're working on. And I love getting paid to read the news. So those are things that make me happy and feel gratified. I also have an incredible manager, and that can't be overstated as something that I think is really important for feeling happy where you are. So in terms of what's next professionally, what's next is being where I am and It's funny, our organization is going through a restructuring right now, and I have a handful of colleagues that are leaving. And I was talking to them about their decision, and I knew I didn't want to leave because I'm learning so much every day. Like, even if things are frustrating sometimes, if someone were to yank me out, it would feel premature. I'd be like, I didn't finish what I was trying, the way I was trying to grow there, So it's really good to feel like me working in the role I am is part of like a self-improvement project for myself, or self-development, I guess. I also feel the same way about living in the city. Like, I didn't like New York when I first moved here. I came here for school and thought, I'm going to get the degree and get out. I thought I wanted to live in DC. It felt a little bit less intimidating to me. There are a ton of Buckeyes in DC for some reason, and that's where I wanted to be. But New York kind of got its hooks in me, and I didn't expect it to happen. I felt really overwhelmed by it. It makes you feel so insignificant. Every morning you're waiting for the train and you see these trains zoom by with hundreds of people with their own lives and their own apartments and worries and their dogs and their jobs. And you have to accept what a tiny piece of the world you are. But I also think awareness of that is realistic and sometimes even comforting. So I have really enjoyed being here. I don't know if I'll be here forever, but if someone told me I was leaving anytime soon, it would make me sad. So what's next, hopefully, is continuing on the path I'm on.
You probably just sold every Buckeye here in Columbus on New York City because it's a hot spot. A lot of students want to go there. They're probably thinking, what do you mean you didn't like New York City? But it's an experience, right? It's an experience, and I'm definitely sure it grows on you. I haven't had an opportunity to spend as much time there as I would like, but we have quite a few alum in New York City as well. So I definitely understand that. So before we let you go, I have to ask the question. This is my favorite question because I'm always really curious. If you could recommend one thing for our Buckeyes to try out that you think would add value, what would that be? Like, it could be a book, it could be a podcast, music, an experience, whatever that might be.
Sure. The thing I'm recommending is, it's a thing, it's a book, it's a podcast, and it's an experience. And that thing is nonviolent communication. I am a huge fan. It was recommended to me, a book about nonviolent communication, I think about 2 years ago. And it is mind-blowing. I love how much I've learned from the concept, and I take it into my job all the time. I have been able to give my boss advice that she wants to hear. And she ended up buying the book and listening to this podcast as well, because she really appreciated the nonviolent communication perspective. The name's a little misleading. It's not just about communication. I think communication is really core to nonviolence, but it's sort of like a lifestyle and a way of thinking and seeing yourself and other people. One thing I really got from it, for example, is the idea that sacrificing yourself to make someone else happy or to please your boss or whatever, sacrificing yourself is still sacrificing someone. And it helped me recognize some of my own boundaries and values and the things I think I deserve. It was integral in my decision to get a new job, because I realized I have a set of needs, they have a set of needs, they're not matching. The nonviolent solution is to leave. And I'm so glad I did. So I have gained a lot from that. It's kind of wonky. It might be hard to accept at first because it requires sort of turning upside down the way you see the world, but it is so worth it.
That was really, really powerful. It's this idea of, students, listen to this, idea of self-sacrifice and how unhealthy that could be for your personal well-being, for your mental health. So I really appreciate you mentioning that. Check out that podcast, read the book, whatever, you do that it helps you like take all that information in, engage as much as possible. All right, Celia. So as we send you off so you can get back to all the wonderful things, and Jennifer over there as well, any final words or piece of advice that you would want to leave Ohio State students, our Ohio State community with, that you think would be something that really should resonate with them?
College is so fun. Everyone tells you how fun it is. Everyone tells you you're going to miss it. It's kind of stressful to hear that all the time. And college is a time of incredible self-doubt for a lot of people. And so is the years after you graduate. It's hard to make that self-doubt go away. But I think an important strategy is to remind yourself to believe the nice things that people tell you about you. You know, if you write a great paper and your professor says you really have a knack for this, or your friend says you're such a great listener and you make them feel loved, don't just brush those things off. I think it's helpful to write them down and remind yourself, if you notice you're feeling stressed about an assignment, even if the stress is irrelevant to the nice thing somebody said, just like sitting and being like, yes, I'm afraid I'm going to fail my chemistry final. Yes, this could jeopardize my medical career, but I'm a good listener. It's helpful to have some balance. And I think if we could all believe people more readily when they are kind to us, we would feel a lot better going through our lives. And it would make something like college, where there's a lot of self-doubt and a lot of fear about what's ahead, a little bit easier.
I actually needed to hear that, so thank you.
Yeah.
And that goes to show at any point in time in your journey, you need to be reminded of those things. So that was fantastic. I really appreciate it. Well, Celia, thank you so much for joining us this morning and taking some time to just chat with us about your experiences, the things that you've learned, the things that have been really important to you that help guide you along the way. We are very, very grateful for all the gems and the nuggets that we collected today, and we look forward to continuing to engage and connect about leadership and growth and development for our Buckeye community. Thank you again, and for everyone else, until next time, we shall see you soon.
Thanks for doing this.